Welcome to Mishna study. We're after Masechet Demai, Perek Bet Mishnah Gimal. Over here in this Mishnah, we're going to speak about becoming a Haber. So, with last Mishnah, we discussed if a person wanted to become a Ne'eman, trustworthy. Now a person wants to become a Haber. Rambam understands Haber, and we'll explain later why, is a Tamid Hacham, someone who wants to be trusted and like a Tamid Hacham, who could be trusted over the laws of Tumah and Tahara. Right? So not just the laws of Turumot and Ma'asrot that we mentioned was an Ne'eman. Over here, Haber has to do with the laws of Tumah and Tahara. המקבל עליו להיות חבר, אינו מוכר לעם הארץ לח ויבש, ואינו לוקח ממנו לח, ואינו מתארח אצל עם הארץ, ולא מערכו אצלו בכסותו. רבי יהודה אומר, אף לא יגדל בהמה דקה, ולא יהיה פרוס בנדרים ובשחוק, ולא יהיה מטמא למתים, ומשמש בבית המדרש. אמרו לו, לא באו אלו לכלל. So if a person wants to accept upon himself to become a Haber, what's a Haber? Haber is a Tamid Hacham. Rambam explains that Tamidei Hachamim are called Haverim, literally, we use the term as friends, and it's because of their connection to one another, right? They form a Havra, they form a group, a community, right? And their friendship is rooted on something that's L'Shem Shamayim, right? Something that's purely for the sake of heaven. And that's why we're calling them Haverim, because of their gathering together is the Shem Shamayim, right? So that's the Tamid Hacham over here, who is a Haver. And we're calling them a Haver over here in what regard? That they're trusted over Tumah and Tahara. So if a person wants to now become a Haver, how does he do so? He has to accept it in front of 3 other Haverim. And if he's a Tamid Hacham, or better yet, but if he's a Tamid Hacham, he doesn't have to do it in front of 3 Haverim. He could do it just in front of 1 other person, and that's enough. Not only that, but someone else who wants to become a Haver could do it in front of this 1 other person himself, right? Because he's Tamid Hacham, he could actually, help this other person become a Haver if they accept it in front of this other person. And once he becomes a Haver, what's the benefit? He's trusted over the laws of Tumah and Tahara. Right? Any food and drinks that come from under him, right? From his house, that's considered tahor. His clothing is tahor, right? He's trusted like a Tamid Hacham. Now, what are these things that he needs to do? He can't sell to an Am Haaretz something wet or dry. And what's the reason for this? It's a mahloket whether or not one is allowed to make things or cause tum'ah to things in Eretz Yisrael. According to this Mishnah, according to the Mande Amar in this Mishnah, he holds that you're not allowed to cause tum'ah to foods in Eretz Yisrael, to things in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, according to him, you're not allowed to sell anything to an Am Haaretz. Why? Because he's going to make it tameh. So therefore, it's your responsibility not to let it become tameh. So that's why you're not allowed to go ahead and sell to an Am Haaretz anything that's dry or wet. And you're not allowed to buy, this is according to anyone, you're not allowed to purchase from him something that's wet, something that's moist. And why so? Because something that's wet, it means that it became susceptible to accepting tumah. And what's this, as opposed to something dry, right? Let's say, for example, someone has wheat in the field. Once it's harvested, once it's picked, and it comes in contact with tumah, a dead person, right? That wheat still doesn't become tameh until it becomes susceptible to accepting tumah. When does it become susceptible to accepting tumah? Once it comes in contact with one of the shiva mashkim, one of the 7 liquids. We can explain what these 7 liquids are. One of them is water, dew, right? There's different types of liquids that make something susceptible to. So a person leaves his apple outside, right? And now he wants, he's waiting for it to rain. It rains on the apple, right? He wanted it there. That apple is now susceptible to becoming tameh. Once someone who's tameh touches that apple, now that apple can become tameh, right? We learn this from the pasuk, v'chiyutan mayim al zera, right? So we need to have it, susceptible to becoming tameh. And how does that happen? Once it becomes wet. Right, so now we're saying once we're buying this from Am Haaretz, if it became wet at some point, right, then we're not allowed to buy it from him because it's susceptible to becoming tameh, and therefore the Am Haaretz probably made it tameh. But let's say I want to buy something dry from him, from the Amaretz, right? We could trust the Amaretz to say that this was always dry, it never became wet. And if I'm buying that thing from him dry, it's impossible for it to become tameh, so I'm allowed to do so. The next part, next third criteria is eno mitareach etzel ha'ma'aretz. You can't sleep by them, right? You can't become a guest. You can't be a guest by them. Why so? Right? So Rambam explains over here that you can't lo me'archo b'chsuto, right? You can't be a guest, right? You can't have him and in your clothing. Why? So you don't become tameh from it, right? You don't become tameh. Or b'chsuto shel ma'aretz, better yet, right? You shouldn't wear his clothing, right? Because by doing so, you'll become tameh from the clothing. The next one, now Rabbi Yehuda, those are the three according to Tanakh. Rabbi Yehuda comes and adds another 4 criteria. One is you can't grow a behemadaka, right? You can't grow animals in Eretz Yisrael, right? Sheep. Why? Because they go into other fields and they eat from everyone else's field. And that's thievery, right? Because they're eating from someone else's field in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, you're not allowed to really even be a shepherd of behemadaka in Eretz Yisrael. If you do so, you're actually pasula edut, as we'll see in Masechet Sanhedrin. So Rabbi Yehuda says this is one of the criteria to also becoming a Haber. The next one is you can't be parus bindarim, right? You can't be parus bindarim l'schok. You can't have too much, right? I mean, someone is always swearing, even if it's coming true, right? You know, just swear, heck, as much as you want, b'schok. The next one is lo yetameh metim. You can't become tameh lamet. And the last one is mishamesh bet midrash. You should serve, right, in the bet midrash, serve the people, the Talmud Torah in the bet midrash. Those are additional 4 that Rabbi Yehuda adds, and Chachamim say no. Those weren't part of the criteria. The only criteria we have were the first 3, and halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda, rather like Tanakh.